Hi everyone, so just a little disclaimer before I get into this. In this video I will be covering some distressing subject material. I'll be quoting some things that if you're a survivor of sexual abuse, I just want to give you that heads up. We'll be discussing this based on media reports, so it's a sensitive subject, but a very important subject, I think. Doing this for two reasons. Firstly, it's an important issue, and secondly, make clear my own position on this because with my heavy criticism of Elon Musk, and I stand by everything I've said, some people may misinterpret my stance, somehow wanting to downplay the Grooming Gangs Scandal, which is absolutely the last thing I want to do. I think I've made videos on this subject before, and I've always been very clear that it is a big problem. Has been a big problem in this country. It's one of the worst crimes collectively this country has ever seen in terms of a collective um, criminal enterprise. I mean, obviously, there's different gangs operating in different towns, but it's something that does have certain characteristics. The reality is there is an overrepresentation of British Pakistani men who preyed on predominantly young white female victims. That's just the reality. Now, I'm going to be covering several aspects of this. Bear with me. The Times yesterday had a big double page spread on this story. Show you. So that's my basis here. Um, I'm going to break this up into a few different sections. Bear with me. This probably will be a longer video, but like I said, it's an important issue. The main report is by Stephen Swinford, Aubrey Allegretti, Matt Daffin, and Oliver Wright. Pakistani men are overrepresented among those involved in gangs that groom and rape children, the Shadow Justice Secretary has said, as the Tories rejected claims by Sir Keir Starmer that they were amplifying far-right views. Robert Jenrick told Times Radio that some of those who had arrived in Britain as migrants had come from countries and cultures that had backward attitudes towards women. He repeated comments by Kemi Badenoch, the Conservative leader, that not all cultures are created equal, adding we should be very careful about who is coming into this country and the scale of immigration. Jenrick said Pakistani men are overrepresented in those who are involved in the grooming gangs, and the evidence we have seen is that some of those have specifically preyed upon white working class girls because they viewed them as worthless. Now, Jenrick is absolutely right. I remember I made a video on Robert Jenrick making a comment about protesters shouting Allahu Akbar and how that was inappropriate and how the police should move in on it. And I have no doubt the left wingers will attack Jenrick for this, but I don't like everything that Jenrick stands for. He's a Tory, I'm not. But I think what we often see in politics is people will be partisan for the sake of it, rather than recognising a statement of truth. And what Robert Jenrick has said on this occasion is true. He shouldn't be criticised for telling the truth. Um, Having said that, the Tories can't exactly hold their heads high on this because, they're sort of jumping on the bandwagon now, attacking the Labour government. But remember, this stuff was going on their watch as well. It's true that a lot of the councils were Labour councils, but I think the problem with this partisan blame game is the victims get sidelined. And actually, there's an op-ed by Alice Thompson to show you. She makes a fair point. Once again, no one talks about the girls, so there's a lot of discussion about a lot of other factors in this. Um, I agree with her to an extent. What I don't agree with is the idea that talking about the racial demographics of the abusers is somehow irrelevant or not important. I think it is. But she is right to point out that with all the partisan mudslinging, the victims get overlooked. I mean, their voice should be heard. Just going to quote a bit of what she says here. This is her op-ed, I should say. He was my Prince Charming. When he raped me, I always felt it was my fault, Sammy Woodhouse once told me while discussing her horrific grooming ordeal as a teenager in Rotherham. Arshad Hussain, known as Mad Ash, the Muslim ringleader of a child abuse gang, had picked out the prettiest young girl in town. Sammy's dream at 12 was to be a dancer, but within days he was beating and raping her. I was like a dead body on a slab. I was in such pain. I knew I had to get away, but I couldn't, she said. Bear in mind, this is a young girl we're talking about. Um, for years, Susanna plied Sammy with vodka and spliffs and raped her on stone mattresses in abandoned flats with his friends. Sometimes he would hold a gun to her head, thrash her until she lost consciousness, or force her to commit crime, she said. "I didn't always treat me like a bastard, treat me like a queen, too." This is an exact quotation. This animal, this piece of shit, is now serving 35 years in prison. So, yes, they have got stiff sentences, but this went on for years. That's the reality. Um, like I say, I sort of agree with Alice Thompson's op-ed here that the victim should be central to this. Of course, they should. But she also says, and I don't really agree on this point, um, yet again, they appear to be pawns, this time in a toxic argument about race, culture, and integration. A toxic argument? No, Alice Thompson, it's a very relevant argument, actually, when there's an overrepresentation of British Pakistani men. I mean, virtually every case in these grooming gangs was British Pakistani men. The victims were young white girls. Now, the left's attitude to this has always been to say, oh, but predators, there's white predators as well, and of course there are. We know about Jimmy Savile, we know about other high profile cases of white predators, but there simply isn't an equivalent of white gangs predominantly preying on young Asian girls. I mean, if that ever gets exposed, then, you know, then that will be the case. But this is a specific thing, and no one is saying that there are no white predators. No one is saying that only British Pakistani men are guilty of sexual offences. Predators are predators. There are white predators, of course there are, but the point is no one is saying otherwise. So when the left get the sort of knee-jerk reaction, oh, you're pandering to the far right, you're stigmatizing all British Pakistani men. I think of two prominent British Pakistani men, Sajid Javid, then Home Secretary, and Majid Nawaz, the journalist and commentator. I think Nawaz has went a bit off his rails in recent years, but that's beside the point. He was right about this. They're both prominent British Pakistani men, and they spoke up and said, look, this is a problem in our community. There is a problem with British Pakistani men preying on young white girls. I have absolutely no doubt that political correctness played a role in this not being addressed the way it should have been, because of this fear of, if we approach this, then it's racism. You can't say that it's just that group. I have no doubt that political correctness played a role. Incidentally, the Times has a cartoon which is sort of, I think I've interpreted this as pitching on the Tories' exploitation. I'll let you make of this what you will. Give that a few seconds. You can pause the screen. Basically, it's showing Robert Jenrick as a hypocrite because he's talking about it now, but when they were in power, they didn't talk about it. There may be some truth in that. It's right that there is a debate, though. I don't think it's. I mean, yes, there's partisan mudslinging, but it's right that there is a debate around this. Otherwise, it'll happen again. Now, one of the criticisms that or one of the angles that people have attacked me on is because I've mentioned Elon Musk. Well, I'll repeat what I said. I don't think Elon Musk has a place in this. I don't think it's Musk's business to be sticking his nose into this and stirring things up. The man has a track record of spreading disinformation and lies. And the last thing we would need right now is more fuel on the fire when there's already tensions in this country. During the riots last year, Musk falsely claimed that rioters were sent to the Falklands. So someone who's just subscribed to my channel asked this question: what have you got against Elon Musk talking about this? Surely it's a good thing that he's exposing the grooming gangs. I want the grooming gangs to be exposed. I hope every last one of these scumbags faces years behind bars because what they've done is evil, absolutely despicable. These are despicable criminals, and they should hope every last one of them. Many of them have been jailed, but I hope they all get jailed. Um, so I've no issue with grooming gangs being exposed, but I do question Musk's agenda. This is where I part ways with some of those who are quoting Elon Musk. I don't think Elon Musk really cares. I think this is about him furthering his feud with Keir Starmer. I don't think Elon Musk really cares about the victims of grooming gangs. I mean, it could be argued with his vast wealth, he could be, funding survivor therapy. He could be sending that money to victims. As far as I know, he hasn't done that. I mean, people could correct me if I'm wrong about that, but he's divulging all his energy into attacking Keir Starmer, and some of it is downright inflammatory. For example, he has described Jess Phillips. Um, Here we go. So Musk barbs that Sir Keir Starmer was complicit in the rape of Britain. The rape of Britain is how Musk describes it, over his handling of grooming gangs, that Phillips was a witch and a rape genocide apologist, went largely unanswered. This is regarding the government's response to Musk's barbs. So this is absolutely inflammatory. This week, Jess Phillips has received death threats because of Musk's mouth, basically. This is why I have a problem with Elon Musk. I don't think he's part of the solution at all. I think he's just pouring fuel on the fire, and I don't think he's helping the victims. I really don't. Um, if he was really trying to do something constructive, if he was sending money to the victims to help with their, you know, to help survivors with therapy, with bringing about prosecutions, that sort of thing. But all he's doing is trying to further his feud with Keir Starmer. And this isn't to say that Starmer is above criticism. I do think, I'll say this, I think that Starmer continues to be too politically correct. I mean, this isn't a small thing. I think Starmer done himself no favors with his far right comments. Um, for Labour to be coming out with this sort of stuff and saying that it's just pandering to the far right, doing themselves no favours. And this is one area where the Tories and Reform are probably going to be more in touch with public opinion. You know, it's no good for number 10 to say, oh, but we weren't talking about rape survivors, we weren't talking about campaigners, we were just talking about the Tories. The problem is the optics, tying in the far right to that. I just think it was ill judged. I think Starmer puts foot in that one because whatever his intentions were, if he was talking, but even if he was just talking about the Tories, it's also misplaced because what Robert Jenrick has said is accurate, So, I mean, I think that's put in his mouth with that. But talking to putting foot in mouths, the Conservative peer, Lord Ahmed of Wimbledon, urged Jenrick to reflect on some of his comments. It's not the first time Lord Ahmed of Wimbledon has, you know, put political correctness before public safety. Lord Ahmed of Wimbledon has repeatedly used Islamophobia, for example, to shackle legitimate debate on extremism. Um, so Lord Ahmed of Wimbledon would do well to consider the victims instead of trying to lecture fellow politicians for telling the truth, basically. Um, no, I don't think Jenrick should moderate his words because I don't think he said anything unreasonable. He has simply pointed out that there are people who come into this country with regressive attitudes to women. Um, and again, this isn't to say there aren't white predators. I mean, there are, but there is simply a reality that what we had with the grooming gangs was Pakistani men preying on white girls because they saw them as worthless. They looked down on them. These were racist grooming gangs, actually. Um, so it's very relevant. I'm just going to read out a bit about the Times' Andrew Norfolk. Now, he actually defends Starmer. Um, he is a Times journalist who helped to expose this. Tommy Robinson gets a lot of credit on this, but I think there's other people who deserve more credit than someone like Tommy Robinson, like this guy, Andrew Norfolk. The National Inquiry into Child Sex Abuse failed to get to grips with the root causes of grooming gangs, which have still not been properly examined, according to the Times report who exposed the scandal. Andrew Norfolk, the newspaper's former chief investigative reporter, said that such abuse would never be fully stamped out until there was proper research into an understanding of the issues of religion, culture, and social cohesion that had allowed criminals to flourish. Norfolk, who more than a decade ago revealed the widespread abuse of young white girls by predominantly Asian men, said that concerns over racism and other cultural sensitivities meant that the causation factor had never been properly examined. So this is tangible evidence that that political correctness, that sensitivity about race absolutely did play a role in not bringing prosecution sooner. So the left can't claim that that wasn't a factor because it was. Um, they shied away from it, he warned, although he stopped short of calling for a national public inquiry as he questioned how it would help victims of the scandal. Norfolk, who retired in November, expressed incredulity at online misinformation and cover up claims, given his reporting led to independent inquiries, resignations, police investigations, and prosecutions. Andrew Norfolk, he's not a household name the way some agitators are, but he should be. So all those right wing people out there who are being very vocal about this, they should be thanking someone like Andrew Norfolk for trying his level best to do something about this, as a journalist. Um, in a wide ranging interview, he criticised the relentless attacks on mainstream media by Elon Musk, the world's richest man and owner of X, whose claims about grooming have reignited the scandal this week. I mean, I would argue Norfolk's done a hell of a lot more on this issue than Elon Musk has. I mean, where was Elon Musk several years ago when this was going on? It's not like this is suddenly a new story. It's been in the British press for years. So where's Elon Musk been? He's just exploiting this because of his feud with Starmer. The truth is a concept that Elon Musk clearly has very little interest in, said Norfolk, emphasizing that the grooming was only exposed for his years of painstaking reporting. He also defended Sir Keir Starmer after Musk accused the Prime Minister of being complicit in the rape of Britain. Starmer was Director of Public Prosecutions in Norfolk, revealed the grooming and sexual abuse of vulnerable girls by organised groups of men in towns and cities across the north, and the reluctance of child protection authorities to take action in towns including Rotherham, Rochdale and Telford. Starmer met Norfolk and discussed how official guidelines were hampering prosecution for a string of reasons, including a lack of coherent accounts from victims because they had been plied with drugs and alcohol. "I want to put the record straight on this," Norfolk said. "It was Starmer who changed the rules to take more prosecutions possible." So Norfolk's actually saying that Starmer did try to do something about this. That happened, and there was a huge increase in convictions. He added there is now much greater awareness of what was happening, and where it is identified, it must be tackled. Priorities, budgets, and training have changed massively. However, he pointed to a critical piece of research that had never been done. He was disappointed when the independent inquiry into child sexual abuse, which issued its final report in October 2022 and was led by Professor Alexis J, did not examine the issues of why the grooming scandal happened. That's one thing that was left out of that report. Norfolk paid tribute to Jay's hugely important work on Rotherham after her explosive report in 2014 revealed at least 1,400 girls, some as young as 11, had been victims of sexual exploitation between 1997 and 2013 in South Yorkshire town. However, the national inquiry shied away from investigating the causation of grooming gangs, probably for not dissimilar reasons why left-wing academics still attack me. So Norfolk has actually come under attack from these politically correct minnows who don't like the fact that he's saying there has to be causal research into this, which certainly would. It's difficult to talk about without being accused of being Islamophobic. That says it all. So this man, Andrew Norfolk, is taking a very level-headed and balanced approach. He is someone who really deserves a lot of credit, and yet left-wing politically correct minnows attack him. It's pathetic, utterly pathetic. Um, if Sir Keir Starmer met him, then I hope Starmer. This is why I think Starmer isn't helping his own case. You know, he's got a right to defend himself, but talking about the Tories pandering to the far right only reiterates that reputation that Starmer's politically correct, which is ironic because he actually did try to do something about it as Director of Public Prosecution. However, Norfolk strongly believes that independent research of a range of issues is essential to understanding the phenomenon. Such issues include Islamic jurisprudence and the impact it has had on treatment of girls and women, and ingrained factors in some communities, such as arranged and cousin marriages, and how they affect relationships. Again, this is an area where We cannot allow cultural differences to get in the way of public safety. Why one very small subsection of one minority ethnic community was so disproportionately responsible for these crimes, that is work that would be vital in bringing about understanding that could enable changes to take place. How do you address it and stamp it out if you don't understand why it's happening in the first place? Well, this is the argument I've always made. How can you talk about a problem? How can you address a problem if you can't talk about it? Because I really have no respect, and it has to be said, it's predominantly left wingers whose knee jerk reaction to this, if anyone talks about cultural attitudes, oh, you're pandering to the far right, you're being Islamophobic, you know, they seriously need to get into the real world. Um, because it's their attitude, I think, that put up barriers in the first place. Because a lot of the local authorities, um, and probably the police as well, took that attitude. We better not go there, it's too sensitive. Just to continue the report, he warned everybody it's still too scared, but it was a vacuum that allowed the far right to continue exploiting grooming victims. It's a void into which Elon Musk and the far right activist Tommy Robinson can shout, spread lies and poison. Robinson painted himself as a defender of women, but in fact nearly allowed a grooming trial to collapse with his irresponsible public comments, Norfolk pointed out. Norfolk does not countenance the claims of a cover up. The authorities did not see what was staring them in the face for many complex reasons, he said. Some police saw the victims as willful teens making a lifestyle choice, while classism and sexism were also a factor in the lack of action. On top of that was the sensitivity of the subject, the literal angst in being labelled racist by identifying perpetrators. In the interests of cultural cohesion, they denied it was going on. He finds it utterly staggering that the issue is reignited so long after it was first exposed. It seems that Musk clicks his fingers, shoots his mouth off, and the whole British establishment responds. I find it surprising that man's wields so much power. Um, that I totally agree with. Why do we give Elon Musk such credence? Anyone who thinks Elon Musk is motivated by altruistic reasons on this, like I say, he's just waded into it now. This has been going on in this country. It's been an issue for years. So why hasn't Musk spoken out before if he cares so much about it? Um, some of the things that were recommended in the J report was the good points. Cabinet level Minister for Children, a legal duty to report child abuse, a national database of abuse, compensation for victims, establish protection bodies, national public awareness campaigns, make better use of the DBS barred list, tackle abuse online, improve life for victims in court, more support for victims, ban headlocks and arm twists. This is referring to, Jay said, pain compliance techniques that involve the deliberate infliction of pain to control children must be banned. This has not been done according to the Survivors Trust. Amend the Children's Act 1989. All good points, but what it negates to mention is understanding the causal effect, i.e., cultural attitudes to women, which Andrew Norfolk has touched on. Yeah, and there's another report by Constance Campner here. The ringleader of a Rochdale grooming gang is still living and working in the town nearly a decade after he was ordered to be deported by a judge. That's an absolute disgrace. Kwari Abdul Rauf, 55, was part of a gang of 9 Asian men convicted of sex offences against vulnerable girls in 2012, including rape and trafficking. The former taxi driver and preacher was jailed for 6 years, but released in November 2014 after serving 2 years and 6 months of his sentence, which is the sort of thing that absolutely infuriates the public and, really damns our justice system. He was told he would be deported to Pakistan following his release from jail, with immigration tribunal judges twice rejecting his appeal against deportation in 2020 and 2022. In the 2022 ruling, judges found a very strong public interest case for removing Rauf. His lawyers had tried to argue that having renounced his Pakistani citizenship, deportation would effectively render him stateless. However, a previous hearing concluded it would be relatively easy for Rauf and Adil Khan, another convicted member of the gang, to reclaim their Pakistani identities, but they were unwilling to do so. Lawyers also argued that deportation would strip the men of their right to family life. Oh, boo-hoo. Um, as they set out in the Human Rights Act, as they have wives and children in the UK. I mean, the irony of, you know, sex abuse groomers being good family men is pathetic. Raif, a father of five, was convicted of trafficking a 15-year-old girl for sex and for having sex with her himself. Sentencing him in 2012, Judge Gerald Clifton described a former taxi driver who was also a religious studies teacher in a mosque in Rochdale as a deeply hypocritical individual. It's now emerged Rauf remains living in the town, where he has spent some time working for a takeaway delivery app. Neighbours told the Mail Online that they were shocked it was still living on the street. One said nobody can believe that monster is still here after what he did to those young girls. It's disgusting. I can't believe he was delivering takeaways to people's homes. Just imagine it. You're one of his victims and you open the door to get your meal and he's there. The Home Office has come under pressure this week to publish figures for the number of convicted grooming gang members to have been deported. The Home Office was contacted comment. This piece of shit should not be free to roam the streets. He should be in prison or deported. That is what infuriates people about our justice system. Whichever judge decided that he deserved early release should bow their head in shame. Um, yeah. Anyway, I'm going to wrap this up. But in conclusion, when people ask me why are you against Elon Musk wading into this, because I don't think he's motivated out of interest for the victims. I think he's solely motivated for political reasons to have a go at Keir Starmer. I do think that Starmer is too politically correct. I think he's wrong to talk about, the Conservatives pandering to the far right. I think that's stupid, and it won't do him any favours. But some of the criticism against Labour ministers is unfair. I think it's local authorities, and yes, some of them were Labour, most of them were Labour, do deserve blame, and police forces. But I think some of the venom that's being thrown at Starmer and Phillips is unfair. Um, Starmer did try to address this problem as director of the CPS. Clearly, not enough was done, but I think it's unfair to say that he done nothing. Um, I think those left wingers who talk about Islamophobia and racism and regarding this, they should be absolutely ashamed of themselves. Talking about Asian grooming gangs is not vilifying all Asian men. It's just pointing out a reality. Um, but I've said this years ago. I've said this years before I was criticizing Elon Musk. Literally, I've made other videos on this case, and I always said that political correctness cannot stand in the way of public safety. So I hope I've made my position very clear. Um, I don't think Robert Jenrick's wrong to say what he said. But absolutely, the victims must be up. They must be central to this. Their voices must be heard. So, is there any lessons? The lesson is that political correctness should not stand in the way of prosecutions. It should not stand in the way for relevant authorities, local officials, police forces, and so on, to act when allegations are made. Now, everyone deserves due process, of course. But the problem is, if this isn't acted on, it does fuel public anger. And then, yeah, the far right exploits it. I've never believed that Tommy Robinson is the answer to this. Um, both him, Elon Musk, others, they have a track record of spreading disinformation. That's just a reality. People who do deserve credit are people like Andrew Norfolk, investigative journalists, actual journalists. Tommy Robinson is not a journalist. He's tried to pass himself off as such at times, but he's not. Um, Andrew Norfolk exemplifies what a good journalist is all about. Shame on those left wingers attacking him. So I hope I've made my position clear. If you're going to comment here, then please do take on board what I've said. If you're going to just come on defend Musk, then do you really care about the victims?